living in relationship is key to who we're becoming and who we want to be.
Welcome to the In Her Image podcast, where we seek and celebrate our Mother God through scripture, scholarship, the arts, and everyday life. I am Jess Burdett, and today I am joined by two powerhouse women who we have had on the podcast previously, and today we get them both together talking about a new work that has just come out just in time for this new year. And I'm really excited to jump in and talk with them about their inspiration for the book and their vision for it. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, Bethany Brady Spalding and McArthur Krishna.
Yay!
Such a joy to you.
Thanks for having us.
So my first question for you, we're talking about a brand new workbook that has come out. Maybe you've seen it on social media or somewhere. It's got a bright yellow cover. It's an ebook and it's called In the Image of Our Heavenly Parents, A Couple's Guide to Creating a More Divine Marriage. I personally was really excited about this book. Creating a more partnership marriage has been a goal of mine and ours, my spouse and I. And this is just a resource that I'm really excited about. So first of all, I'd like to know what inspired the creation of this book.
So Bethany and I keep joking that we're going to retire, right? And then ideas just kind of begin to swirl. And when they get like swirly enough and energetic enough, then one of us calls the other and is like, look, we're still on the hook. Like we got one more to do. And I think this one was a confluence of a couple of different things going on. We had loved Elder Renlund's invitation to study the gospel topics essay. And there's actually a lot of meat in there. I'm a vegetarian. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of substance in there. And for us, one of the things that hit us is that there are some revolutionary ideas in there that we're talking about being our doctrine, but that are not maybe fully present in how we see the world or how we function. And so, I mean, we dug in and started doing research and figuring out things. But what we both realized is that the model of our heavenly parents working together as partners was a divine model. And then, frankly, we always write books for ourselves. And so we have written The Girls Who Choose God because we each have 3 daughters, right? Like we wrote the Girls Guide and the Boys Guides because we have children who we want to have this resource. And so partly we're also writing for our own marriages, right? Like, let's talk about this. And so, you know, Bethany and I spent a year and a half, whatever, working on this book. And then I'm sitting down with my husband being like, okay, let's do this now, right? Like this is, it's time to work. But I think that there's always some sort of balance between like the whole that we see in the world and the whole that we see in our own lives. And when those line up, that means there's a powerful need.
But we have to be clear here. We are no experts on marriage. My husband can shout out from the other room and attest to that, right? We're no experts. So we didn't write about marriage. What we did is that McArthur and I worked together to pull out all of this prophetic revelation that we've been given from prophets, apostles, and female church leaders for decades, and even actually centuries, celebrating this beautiful LDS restoration doctrine of heavenly parents and divine partnership. And with that, we kind of developed a framework of 12 principles that we can work to be in the image of our heavenly parents to become better partners. But then because we're not the experts, we reached out to 4 really fabulous LDS marriage and family therapists and asked them to contribute on 3 each of these principles. And so this book is a collaborative effort. We brought our knowledge and our love and our passion for this model of heavenly parents and partnership and developed the framework, and the therapist brought the professional expertise. And then we wanted to create a tool that was useful, not just to read about, but to apply, to learn, to practice, and become. And so the book also, with each principle, has a lot of practices to develop our partnership muscles so that couples, we can have more vibrant, thriving, equal partnerships.
And I think that's something that Beth and I both feel really strongly about, is that both of us actually come from and live in academic worlds, right, for various reasons. And the shortfall we sometimes see in those worlds is if you don't apply learning to a situation, then you don't grow. right? And so from our way of thinking, we needed a tool to not just, we've done lots on celebrating Heavenly Mother. I mean, the Girls Guide and the Boys Guide books for us is such a joyous celebration of what this doctrine is. And I'm working on the Cherish book. That's, a joyous celebration. But I think looking at each other and saying, if we have this truth to bless our lives, what do we need to do to apply that truth? Because you can talk about tithing all day long, but unless you actually pay it, right? You can talk about the Sabbath, but unless you actually live it, like these are just topics, right? And so we didn't want Heavenly Mother to just be a topic, right? This is not just something to hold in our hearts, right? This is something for our way of interacting in the world to actually apply. Like, how do we apply this doctrine, this knowledge into our lives? And for us, that was a super exciting idea.
Wonderful.
In the Gospel Topics essay that McArthur referenced, that Elder Renlund invited us to study and to embrace and celebrate, the culmination of the essay says, our theology begins with heavenly parents. Our highest aspiration is to be like them. And we realize that we don't have a lot of kind of curriculum or materials currently in our faith tradition that talks about what is it like to be like them, like this couple of heavenly parents. And I don't know about you, but I've just realized that the quality of my marriage and the state of my marriage impacts my well-being more than anything else.
Mm.
If I am not right in that relationship, no matter what else, other good things that are
Bethany,
going.
you're always right.
No, sorry, like correct. But I'm like, if I'm not focusing and feeling connected and in partnership, that I feel out of sync and not my full self. And so we thought, let's take this theology we have of heavenly parents, and let's take this invitation from Elder Oaks to aspire to be like them, and let's come up with some practical tools and inspiration to learn how to do that. And we thought, so that in marriage is the best place to do that, is to learn how to partner like our heavenly parents.
I love that. So how did you come up with these 12 principles?
So we started working with Dr. Julie Hanks, and she has done actually a PhD in partnership studies and had kind of developed a framework for principles that build healthy, vibrant partnerships. She shared it with us, and she was a great collaborator. And we took it and shaped it and formed it and really fleshed it out to be this 12 principles. We wanted it to be 12 because we're hoping this is a guidebook. We've loved doing the Girls Guide, the Boys Guide. This is a couples guide to kind of navigate this year ahead. And so we thought 12 would be great for one principle a month that couples can focus on. So that's how, using her doctrinal research, we came up with these 12. And I'd love to read them to you. Can I?
Please. Thank you.
12 principles for creating a more divine marriage. 1, we co-create a mutually empowering vision for our partnership. 2, we celebrate the strengths in each partner. 3, we invest in growth, our own personal growth, the growth of our partner, and our growth as a couple. 4, we share spiritual stewardship of our family. 5, we collaborate on leadership and decision-making. 6, we nurture and provide together. 7, we honor all contributions as equally valuable. 8, we access and utilize family resources equitably. 9, we address problems and resolve conflict respectfully. 10, we prioritize fun and friendship in our partnership. 11, we create mutual physical and pleasure and nurturance. And 12, we find joy in the divine pattern of our heavenly parents. So that's the framework that we're inviting people to take one of those topics a month, learn from prophetic revelation of all that's been shared, learn from professional expertise, and then dive into the practices to become more like our heavenly parents.
What's actually amazing to me is that, like, whenever Bethany and I have an idea, for instance, we did the Girls Who Choose God series, right? And so we're like, okay, we're going to do women in the Bible. Is there enough there? And in the Bible, there's plenty, right? And then we hit the Book of Mormon. Is there enough there? And obviously, that's a very different situation, right? And so when we got to this concept of, like, our heavenly parents are this divine model, according to, the Gospel Topics essay, the divine pattern, then we had to dig in and be like, well, what do we actually know about heavenly parents? Let's start collecting it, because it's kind of scattered all over the place, right? And so what's fascinating to me is that we carry, in some ways, this false assumption that we don't know enough to talk about this, or we don't know enough to have a podcast about this, right? But like what's fascinating is when you dig in and you start to actually study a keyword search, Heavenly Parents, on the church's website, all of a sudden, all of these things that pop up that are actually super significant. So one of my favorite quotes from President Nelson, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he talks about that Jesus Christ leads us to the covenant path to return to our heavenly parents, right? So for me, this is this very clear understanding of the roles of those people, right? That Jesus is there to be our advocate and to be our lead and to be the gate to get us there, but he leads us to our parents. The point of Christ's intercession is literally to get us from this point to this point. And that's for us to become godlike, like Elder Oaks is talking about. Our highest aspiration is to be like them, but it's also to literally be with them. And so for me, having some of this knowledge about how our earth life should be literally centers around becoming more like our heavenly parents in their image. We know that we're made in their image. We're made in our heavenly father and heavenly mother's image. And so for me, once I understood that this was a thing, right, and that there was prophets and apostles who talked about it and taught us about it, I thought, oh, this is literally the most important thing we can do with our life, right? Like, we understand that the church is a temporary scaffolding, and it's useful and necessary and helpful to assist us along the path. But who we are and who we're becoming and living in relationship is actually the point of our existence. And so investing our own resources, I mean, literally Bethany and I investing time and money and energy, but also like understanding that living in relationship, and I mean even just beyond marriage, but living in relationship is key to who we're becoming and who we want to be. And so I think for us, having this almost like mind-blowing moment of this angle maybe is the most important thing you could do with your time and energy. And I should also say in here, I didn't get married till I was in my late 30s. And so I freely understand that a marriage partnership is not the place where everybody is right now. And a heterosexual marriage is not the place where everybody wants to be. And we want to be clear about this book, that who this book is for, who the target audience is for, but also because I think that this understanding that men and women working together is divine. This is God's model. God's model is not one sex receiving more investment, making more decisions, being more dominant. That is not God's model. And so I think having this clarity of how men and women work together is definitely way more universal than just marriage. But for those of us who are in that situation or aspire to be in that situation, then it's really important it gets our best energy and effort. And frankly, there are times that Bethany would have a meeting and we have a meeting scheduled to work on the book, and we'd show up and be like, bah! Right? Like whatever was happening in our family life or relationships, can put a wrinkle in how you're feeling, much less like feeling about like working on that topic, right? And so understanding that deserves our best self, I think, is a really, really important idea.
Yeah. I'm glad that you read through the list of the 12, Bethany, and it was so empowering hearing those titles. Like everything, even the titles felt equal. Like both of us, we invest in both of us and us together, and it's a lot of we. And so, yeah, I feel like no matter what relationship you might be in your life, we're all in several, right? That the goal is unity and not division. And so all of these 12 principles felt just very uniting. Like this is about how we can have equality and happiness for both of us, for all of us. And I think that's something that's very much needed in all the world, in all aspects.
Amen.
And
beautiful.
I think when Beth and I were working on some publications last summer, we heard from some women who thought that the topic of Heavenly Mother, if that was important to you, that it in some way pit you in a competition against men, or against Jesus or against Heavenly Father, that somehow those were divisive ideas. And so I think that's one of the things that's at least important to us to be clear, is that we don't see Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother as jealous Greek gods fighting over who gets what kind of attention from humans, right? But that this is a unity that's divine that then we want to learn to emulate. And I think that's something that we need to underscore, right? That this is the unity you're feeling in this is intentional, right? Because this is what we're trying to propagate.
Yes, that's such an important distinction. I think when we view our heavenly parents that way, as jealous or in competition with each other, that's kind of us creating them in our image, right? Like we as human, mortal people, we're the ones who tend to throw drama into things. But if we imagine the most perfect beings in the universe who are coupled in marriage, that doesn't even make sense, right? That they would have anything like that. So yeah, I think that's really important to remember.
Can I share an experience? Jess, I grew up, McArthur and I are about the same age, and growing up, we both were blessed to grow up in caring, kind families. But we grew up, as many generations had before us, with this model, this less than divine model of that men were the head of the home, right? And that never felt right to me. But I saw that in the world around me, is that the men were in charge, that women kind of deferred, women supported, women were in the end. But right as McArthur and I were coming of age, it was 1995, as we were 21 and kind of bursting into adulthood. The Proclamation on the Family was released in Spring General Conference, and
I like that we burst into adulthood. We didn't just have a birthday, or we didn't just
we're bursting. But I was looking at this document again today, and I know it's a challenging document in many ways, but I think it's interesting that this was the first LDS kind of talk from Elder Hinckley and became this proclamation that talked about the concept of equal partners. That was revolutionary, that men and women work as equal partners. But it also talks about, all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each is the beloved spirit, son or daughter of heavenly parents. And so it's this first approach where we're linking image of God, heavenly parents, and equal partners, right? Like this is kind of the genesis of this, I think, this new way of looking at a more divine, not a fallen worldly model of kind of hierarchy and headship, but a divine model of equal partnership. And right after I heard this talk, I actually went on a mission to South Africa. And while I was there, I had the great fortune of meeting a couple who were there, not as missionaries, but the husband was on a sabbatical and teaching at a university in South Africa, and his wife was a musician. But I had grown up around good families and good marriages, but I had never met a couple that just shined in each other's presence. I had never met a couple where they both had passions. They both pursued them. They both knew and understood and loved each other's passions. Mm-hmm. I had just never encountered a couple that really just emulated what full and equal partnership was and the power behind it. And one thing I'll never forget is they used to ride a tandem bicycle together. And it just, to me, it was this beautiful image of two people going on this journey together. And, and their life wasn't easy or simple. They had lots of hardships and challenges, but they just were so animated and alive in each other's relationship. And I was so struck by that. And I didn't get married till another decade later. But when I did, my husband was a recent convert. So we had a civil ceremony, and I asked them to be a part of our ceremony because I loved having them as a husband and a wife, as a couple, kind of helping to marry us as a husband and wife. And again, it felt like in their image as a full and equal partnership that we were trying to emulate and become. And now they're still in their 80s, and they're still going on sabbaticals, and they're working in human rights in West Africa, and they're still growing and learning and becoming and supporting. And I just think we can inspire ourselves, our families, and each other as we cultivate more powerful, vibrant, alive, animated, passionate partnerships. I think we'll think of ourselves, and we'll think of marriage, and we'll think of family life differently.
I love that example. I'm so grateful that you had that model, that couple model to look to, and that you shared that with all of us, because that's such a beautiful picture. So great. So you've talked a little bit about, how these principles have applied to your own marriage, and like coming to your marriage with, okay, now how do we apply this to us? So I'd love to hear either some of your favorite principles currently that are in the book, or just things that you have incorporated in your own marriages from learning these principles.
I promise I'll come around. I'm gonna wander a little bit, but I promise I'll come around. I was with a friend of mine this last week whose marriage was ending. And it was joyous for her to be able to find herself in a place where she could be more fully herself. And thankfully, her husband feels the same way, that while the process has been extremely demanding and difficult, that he also feels joyous in getting to be more himself, right? But when I was talking to them about like some of what had happened in this, kind of what they both said independently in two separate conversations was that our culture had taught the woman to not show up as her full self. And it took her some years to figure out what that looked like. And then when she figured out what that looked like, it became clear that their relationship was not a place to be, right? Mm. And that doesn't mean we have to be the same. I mean, there's ways my husband and I are very similar and ways that we're very different. But I think that if you have an awareness of your full self, then you can show up in your marriage in a more robust way. And I think if we are to become godlike, if a goal of this life is to become whole, then showing up as your whole self or like your best iteration so far, right, will do nothing but bless your marriage, right? So each of these people kind of independently said, if we would have known more about equitable marriage, if we were to marry again, this is something that we would make sure we came to the table with, right? That we came to the table with this understanding of sovereignty and how it's symbiotic to put two sovereign beings together and be equally yoked. And I just thought, like, I know this is not one specific principle that you're asking about, but I think kind of holistically, that's what the power of this is, that if this relationship is worth our best effort, then it means that your best self has to show up, and then you learn together. And so I think that you can't just say, well, if someone's in this kind of situation and they're comfortable, it's good for them, because it means that the divine pattern is not being lived fully. And we think that instead of modeling ourselves off of the world, we need to model ourselves off of heaven, right? Like where are we turning to choose our models? And frankly, I was super interested about where headship came from. And I did some research and read a book from a scholar, and she talked about Martin Luther in the 1500s is the person who came up with the headship idea, that it didn't used to be that that's how people worshiped, that there was not this model that you'd have God and then the husband and then the wife, that came from Martin Luther. And he did lots of other things about making scripture and the word of God accessible to people. But in this way, in setting up that model, and by the time Joseph Smith came along, that had been literally 300 years of baking in. And then we just carried it, right? And so I think for us to have an awareness of where models come from, right? And that we don't look to Martin Luther for our model, right? And being very, very clear about what the divine model is, literally starts to sweep away hogwash. And there's still so much that we default into, and it's so pervasive that you don't even know all the ways it's in your brain until you're trying to pull attention and like pulling out these vines, right? And I don't know if you've ever done landscaping where you're like trying to pull out ivy, right? And it's just so wrapped into every nook and corner of the brick. And the problem is that when you start to pull out the ivy, if there's been too much ivy there, the brick actually loses its integrity. The brick can't stand anymore because the ivy has so wiggled its way in that the structure is no longer sound, right? So you can't actually pull off ivy and have like buildings fall. And so in my mind, this ivy of an incorrect model is so even pervasive in someone like me who thinks a lot about this stuff, right? That we want to make sure that the structures we're building are strong and integrity and will last, right? Like we talk about in our faith a lot about the strength of marriage, the strength of family. And that strength means that we have to hold the integrity of a divine model instead of letting these insidious creepers literally take away the structural integrity of what we're trying to build. And it's real. And so I think that coming at each of these principles is partly just this exercise of pulling ivy like out of your brain. And it's a big deal. Why are you smiling, Bethany?
No, I was just thinking as you were talking, talking about headship and kind of that false model. I'll just share a quick funny story that because my husband is a convert, he didn't grow up with this idea of headship in a home or man should be in charge. And when we moved here to Richmond, in elders quorum, someone gave him a welcome to the word form, and it said on the top like head of household and then spouse. And so of course he wrote my name on the head of the household because I run the show here, right? And he put his on spouse, and they took it back from him and like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't write it that way. You have to be the head of the household. He's like, I'm not. and he's like, or I guess you can put both of us. But it was just so funny that, he didn't have that expectation. But that was the structure. And that's even how things were set up, of that there had to be a head of household, even though we have this restoration doctrine of equal partnerships and that we lead and guide together. And that's a principle I really like. Principle 6 is we nurture and provide together. Also, when we're building our marriage, we realize that this model of a man should just work and earn money and a woman should be mostly at home with kids. My husband felt like that's a tragic model. Like he loves kids. He's like, why should I not have a lot of time with the kids to have the joy and the play and the wonder and the crazy and the chaos of all that? Like, I'm going to miss out if I just provide. And just like you, if you were just at home and just with kids, you're going to miss out on the chance to develop your gifts and your skills and your ability and all the gifts that you have to give in addition to mothering, but all these gifts that you can give to the world. So we as a couple really tried to say, let's support each other doing both, because you will win, the husband will win, the wife will win, and the kids will win if both parents can have opportunities to nurture and provide together. And so my husband has just been a real champion of our work in writing books and in giving me the time and support and space to pursue our love of sharing these ideas with the world. And actually, one time a job came up for me with the nonprofit here in Richmond, and our kids were little and I didn't think I should do it. And Andy actually had a very strong prompting and actually gave me a blessing and said, I can feel like your heavenly parents want you to do this. Like, you were made for this work. Like, your skills, this community needs you. And he said, and I will do everything in my power and rearrange my schedule to make this work possible for you. And it was a tremendous blessing for me and for our community. And so I think just this invitation to live this principle, this partnership principle of we nurture and provide together, and kind of reframing how we care for our families, care for ourselves, and care for our communities in our work and in our home lives. I think that's a real opportunity for couples to really grow in that area.
And I love that Elder Steurer has really underscored that in the last general conference. He talked about nurture and providing are on a spectrum, right? On the kind of like a sliding scale of different talents and different energies. And so I think that having this understanding that the point of all of this is that we're supposed to show up as our best selves. Now, what that actually looks like or what your role means is completely between you, your spouse, and deity, right? And so that doesn't mean that we're not advocating that someone has to be, an NGO specialist, or someone has to be in graduate school, or someone has to like what it is you have to show up as your most whole self, and then figure out what that means in your situation for your talents and your skills and your family. But if you come to it with the understanding that that's the goal, then you orient things in different ways, right? Like you choose different priorities. You build this habit of kind of this mutual support. And I think that's what's important here, not the actual role that someone plays, but like the process of soul investment. We expect that everyone in the family is worth having soul investment. I mean, I, as a mother, spend a lot of energy and time thinking about soul investment in my children. And so how do we make sure that everyone in the family is receiving and growing, right? If that's the point of Earth life, that's what we're here to do, is grow.
Right. And that principle, that's like principle 3. If we invest in growth, our own personal growth, the growth of our partner, and our growth of as a couple. And this is McArthur's point she often makes, but I'll make it for her tonight. But, as we're aspiring to be like our heavenly parents, and if women, as we are aspiring for that, that means like Heavenly Mother's a goddess. So we are aspiring to be goddesses. That means we must grow and develop. That means we can never not be focusing on our growth and development and progress. Like, we can't put that on the shelf. We can't put that aside. We can't negate that. We can't be martyrs and say like that doesn't matter. Like, that will always matter. How in different seasons and different times that looks differently, but that is just something, as we try to live in their image, growth is essential.
And here's actually this lovely story. So I gave a fireside. Bethany and I do that a lot. We give firesides teaching about the gospel topics, what we learn about Heavenly Mother. And I think that one of the things that has been so deeply enriching is when we get stories back of how people have then applied this. And so there's this one woman who came back to me and she said, you should know after your fireside that one of my friends said, "Oh, I need to do some more soul investment. I used to do a lot of things with music and I just have been busy and I've been a mother and I've been consumed and like I just haven't focused on this a lot. So if I'm going to invest in my soul, because people always ask us, how do you invest in your soul, right? And I think that's different for every person. But this woman decided it was going to cultivate her musical talents. And so she wrote this lovely, gorgeous hymn, drawing on talents that she said she hadn't used in years and years. And then she sat there and thought, what do I do with this now? Like, what was this for? And she said a prayer and like cue fast forward, the stake girls camp leader was sitting in front of her computer saying, we need one more musical number. We need one more thing to round this out. Like, how can I find yada, yada, yada? And then the woman who felt the need to, use her talents felt impressed to email her the song. And like all of a sudden, like it becomes this super symbiotic relationship with the world, right? That when you think that you're not just growing in who you are to bless yourself, but you're growing in who you are to bless everyone around you, your family, your spouse, your community, right? That as we become more divine, that does nothing but bless other people. And I think that's true for everyone. That I love this idea that, Bethany's husband is like, I'm going to miss out if I don't grow this side of me, right? So we know that the work and the glory of our heavenly parents is us, right? And so for both a man and a woman to think investing in their family is worth their best effort is crucial, right? And you can invest in your family by financially providing, but you also invest in your family in being present, and in participating and in changing diapers and in loading the dishwasher and like all the things, right? But I think just this understanding of what is worth our best effort. And so some of what we've talked about here with these different principles is like, we as a couple think that this marriage should be a catalyst to invest in our individual and collective growth. If we believe this earth life has put us here to grow, that's the whole point, then this must be in service of that. This relationship, this arrangement has to be in service of that. And so I think it's really, for me at least, it's been a really important, almost rejiggering of how I see. It rejiggers how I see, and then that rejiggers how I spend my time, and rejiggers how I spend family resources, and rejiggers, et cetera, et cetera.
We've talked so much, Jess, we barely let you get your questions in. Holy smokes.
It's great. This is ideal when I can just ask one question and you can just run with it.
But we have to say too.
I don't think anyone's ever accused us of not running. It's
definitely a good thing. A couple thoughts that I've had while each of you have been talking are going back to your ivy analogy. I think that is so good and so interesting how the whole structure can fall if it's all taken out at once. And I was thinking like, yeah, taking out that ivy, like it's uncomfortable. Like imagine how the dirt feels. Like it's used to that, like it's grown around it. And I think it's the same for us too. Even though it's a good work and a needed work and it leaves us better, it can be uncomfortable to just have such a big change. And especially where we're still living in this climate where a lot of couples do operate this way, or, maybe your in-laws or your grandparents or whoever will not understand, or, you might feel like you don't really fit in anymore. But I think it's so important, and especially if we look to the generations that are coming after us, if we're modeling this, what a difference we can make. So I think it's really important, even though it's uncomfortable and it is work, it might take some discomfort on one or both parts of the partnership, but it's
well, they
so
talk
important.
about time that growth is uncomfortable, right? Like status quo is a lot more comfortable. But if we are sent here to this earth life to literally grow, then like that process of pushing, thinking of a plant, pushing through the earth, pushing through, the dirt to reach the light, like that takes oomph, right?
Yeah, some growing pains.
Yeah. And the practices that the therapists put together are really helpful. And just that, they ask us to reflect on like, why is this our default position? Or why did we just do things this way? Or what did we inherit from our parents or grandparents that made us feel like this is the way we should do it? And they have us do some hard reflection and do some like pruning and pulling things out, and have us like make commitments to do it, more deliberately and more patterned after this divine model. And so the practices are really great tools, I think, for restructuring a marriage to be a full partnership. And it's work, right? That's what we tell them. But this is not a book just to skim. This is a book to like get in and get busy and do the hard work. But what better work is there?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
their work and their glory, right?
Yes. So we've talked about it kind of vaguely, but I would love to hear like a really clear picture straight from the creators of the book of how do you envision couples using this workbook?
So my husband's favorite holiday of the year is New Year's Day, because for him, it is just rife with possibility. He's the most buoyant, optimistic human being I know. And so he literally gets giddy at the thought of like writing New Year's resolutions, right? And so what we'd envisioned is that, I mean, we're all a little bit more dedicated in January, though you could pick this up at any time. But when you pick up the book, we're divided into 12 sections because when people have a new idea about how to do something, it doesn't just take hearing the idea, it actually takes practice. So when you pick up the book and you read it through and you say, okay, here's the doctrinal foundation. Here's what prophets are saying about this. Okay, now let me turn to experts who know about family systems. Okay, now let's dig into this exercise. And so each of these 12 areas takes about a month to sit down and read and think through and internalize and figure out where it may not align with how you've been seeing the world, and then doing the work. And so there's actual exercises to force you to sit down and answer these questions and think about this and practice this. And for us, having this moment where we get to apply what we're learning is vital, right? Again, like it goes back to we are doers of the word, not just hearers. And so really practically the way it would work is that the couples need to both be able to spend a little bit of time reading. It's only 100 pages. Like this book is not extensive. It's not exhaustive. We literally limited. Bethany and I had this conversation. Like they don't need to hear more from us. We're not gonna write more here. We're gonna quit talking, right? And so we literally limited what we were saying with this idea that it should be super accessible. So it's a few pages of reading, it's a little bit of thinking, and then digging in, and then spending that month practicing what you've been learning. And then hopefully you get that skill under your belt. Because as you talked about, like if you pull up all the ivy at once, the structure might be in danger, right? So you're not going to just yank everything out at once. But you're like, we're going to practice this. And then you get it under your belt and you've got some new patterns that you're grooving. You're grooving new patterns in your brain about how you think about it. And you're grooving new patterns about how you function as a couple and as a family. And then you move to the next one. So you're like, okay, February 1st, here we go. Let's try this next piece. But it's really written to be accessible with just a few pages of kind of introduction to get some alignment, but not to be daunting. And frankly, well, I personally think therapy is gorgeous. I heard one of the best analogies where it says you go to therapy not because you're sick, but because like the same way you go to the gym to stay healthy. And so I think that's a great model. But I still think a lot of people are intimidated by going to therapy, or a lot of people can't afford therapy. It's expensive. And so having this resource where you can do it in the privacy of your marriage, you're not laying out all your stuff in front of somebody else, right? That you have this opportunity to get a lot of expertise at a very accessible methodology and expense. And so we're trying to make a tool that would be incredibly helpful, right? That's the entire point of this book.
Yep. So whether it's like Sunday mornings in bed together, or on a Friday night date night, or just picking some times to sit down with it on a regular basis, developing some habits over the year to dive in.
And honestly, it's a lifetime of work, right? I mean, we're talking about 12 months to like do this. At the end of this year, no one's going to have a perfect marriage, right? That is not our bar for success of this book. So just this understanding of opening our minds that this is this is worth investing, and then giving us tools of what that actually looks like to practice.
Do you know what? I just realized we haven't even mentioned the names of the family therapists. Marriage and family
Oh
therapists.
no.
Because these are really
Sorry.
luminaries. Like these are some of the brightest, smartest, most thoughtful people in our faith tradition that are helping marriages. And they're Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. I had the great privilege of being in Jennifer's ward in Chicago. And we'd always liked going to church. But when you get to go to a ward and your Sunday school class is a marriage and family class taught by Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, you're like, I'm going to church today, right? Like it was just so great. And again, that was our taste of like, wow, these are going to church or studying a church resource and coming away with new insights, new tools, new things to actually go and apply to enhance our lives. So Jennifer has been just a friend and a mentor and just a wonderful resource, not only to me, but to so many people in our faith tradition. So Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, Dr. Julie Hanks, who we mentioned at the beginning, who her dissertation research was the genesis of our framework, Dr. Ty Mansfield, and Geoff Steurer and his wife, Jody Steurer. So we were grateful to have 2 women, 2 men, again, to have some balance and different perspectives. And we loved even having one of the 4 be like a couple, actually, the Steurers. We thought it was great that they worked together on their contributions and really, again, modeling partnership in what they contributed. So those are the names of the experts in marriage who readers will get to learn from.
And what's so great is they all write and think really differently. And so when you read through the book, it's almost like, in general conference, all the apostles speak with a different rhythm or speak with a little bit of different analogy. And so for different brains, different apostles appeal. And I think this will be similar. Like, I think Ty writes so beautifully, weaving in personal experience to marriage family theory, right? Like that is like, he is just so seamless at that. And Geoff and Jody are so spiritually in tune together, right? So they each are kind of modeling a different strength as they're presenting information, which for me was super fun to read through and kind of get a different flavor that could appeal to different people in different ways.
That is so fun. And it's illustrated by Ben Crowder, correct? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah. We love Ben's work. He had been one of the artists in our guides to Heavenly Mother. And we were looking for an artist that felt adult and modern and clean, and could print on your home printer. Because some of the fine art that we love, I personally, Kurt Richards is a friend of mine, and I have one of his pieces. It would not photocopy well, right? The nuances of those tones are not going to work. But Ben is so fabulous because he's an artist and a graphic designer. So he really has a sensibility about how to make this happen. And in an effort to make this book accessible, we had this big debate about, do we print this? Do we publish this? Like, who's going to publish this? Like, how this is going to work? And one of the reasons we chose an ebook is because it makes it the most accessible format. So we constantly get regularly get emails from all over the world saying, how do I get a copy of The Girl's Guide to Heavenly Mother? Because they don't have Deseret books all over the world. And so they said, I can't order on this or Amazon. It's not even available on Amazon in Europe. Like, how do I get a copy of this? I have a friend coming for the summer. They're going to bring back a suitcase. Like people do all these kinds of in and out crazy things to get resources. And so both Bethany and I have spent significant time abroad, and we thought, okay, we need a resource that anyone in the world can access. We need a resource with a price point that lots and lots and lots of people can access. And in fact, we should be really clear here. So we priced it in a way that we thought was a really great deal. You're getting a lot of therapeutic expertise for $35. However, if someone finds that price point unattainable, we've also been there. We've been in those stages of life. We've been in those situations. And so we literally put on our website on dstreetpress.com, where you're going to go order the book, like, contact us if this is a problem. We will work it out for you. Because in our minds, making sure that this can get to people is super, super important. And we know that there are people who prefer to have these things printed out. So we called Staples, for $17, you can get a professional printout, or you can print it on your home computer, right? Like making sure that people...
Each month you can print out what you're working on. So however...
Absolutely. So we intentionally set it up both in writing and skills and art in such a way to make it as home friendly, expense friendly as possible.
And I just have to make one more comment on Ben's art. It's like, it's so simple, but it's so subtle and so packed in with just so much imagery and symbolism. Like we're just look at these very simple shapes, but actually, what does this mean about like resources and finances? What does this mean about conflict? Or what does this mean about intimacy? Or what does this mean about fun? And it's very clever. It's very smart.
Yeah.
Of his contribution. It's so stimulating and really makes you think. Just again, so simple, but there's so much packed into his art.
Yeah, we love Ben.
Yes, we would love to have him on the podcast. I've always loved his art, and yeah, even though it's so simple, I always have to stop and just stare at a new piece that he posts, and it makes me think so much, and it's amazing how stimulating just
Ben said that he wanted to be able to produce religious art that you could hang all over your office and not have anyone question you.
I think he's done it.
You can be in a professional environment, but you can have a picture of Jesus, right? So it was such an interesting goal. I liked it.
Yeah, that's great.
So we're so lucky. This has been this creation has been, made by so many people, and that's what's so fun about it, is that it again celebrates partnership, not just between two people, but through a lot of people. And I just feel strongly, even with working with McArthur for the last 13 years as our co-author, like partnership brings about the best things. We all have individual strengths, but when we collaborate and come together and partner, like really extraordinary things can happen.
Yeah.
Like, no offense to me, but I've had friends tell me that my books with Bethany are better than my books by myself. Right? And so I'm just like, I know. I call her all the time and try to get her to do another one. I mean, like, just this, like, partnership is the model, right?
It creates magic, where 2 + 2 is more than 4.
Yes.
Well, this has been so informative and lovely. And as my last question, I want to hear, like, what are you hoping that couples gain from this workbook? Like, at the end of the year, if they've done all the 12 different principles, what are you hoping will be the result?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, the last principle is find joy in the divine pattern of our heavenly parents. I mean, for me, that's the goal, is that they find newfound joys as they've learned to pattern, their partnerships more after heavenly parents. And as they've been doing the reconfiguring and the tearing out and the cultivating, all those things, that will experience more joy and more spark of the divine, that will feel that. And because marriage is hard, family life is hard, but I truly believe as we embrace and celebrate and live these principles, we will be more truly joyful, not just happy, not just look good, not just, but like we will experience joy. That's my hope.
And I think, kind of piggybacking on that, when you feel that joy in your relationship, like, huge shout out to my husband, right? Like, the amount of our partnership has enabled so much in this world. I'm going to cry. He'll never listen to this, but like, just to send out into the world, you'll tell him, okay, thanks, pass it on, Bethany. But like, I think true partnership is enabling in the most robust ways. And we're talking about joy. That joy gives you a well to tap into in a myriad of different ways, right? I mean, just have more energy when you're joyous, and more energy and more oomph in the world is a good thing. And so if we can set up these centers of joy and these centers of learning and centers of growth, I think I just have this, I'm a very visual person. So I literally have these like starburst kind of ricocheting off in my mind, right? That you have this epicenter of joy that Bethany's talking about. And then that epicenter of joy is a light that kind of goes out into the world in any number of ways that we probably can't even predict. And so I think that there's both very personal joy that can come, and there's collective joy in a family. And then there's that application to the world and with eternal ramifications that cannot be overstated. So
that is such a beautiful vision. I'm really grateful that you have created this resource. My husband and I purchased it, and we're really excited to do more of it together. Thank you both for creating unity and partnership and getting all these people together to create such a great gift. Do you have any last thoughts before we close out?
Yes, thank you for the effort that you're doing in the world. And thank you for letting us chat tonight. It was really lovely. And we're cheering you on and your podcast and the big event that you're going to host in the spring. And just thank you. And I feel like Latter-day Saints, this is a real gift that we have to give to the world and work with others to just share more light on this topic. And yeah, spread the love, spread the joy. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it. And if you haven't yet, please leave us a review. If you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, you can make a monthly donation at anchor.fm/inherimage. We hope you'll tune in next Sunday for another inspiring episode.